The vibes in the music industry feel off. That might not be the most eloquent way of putting it, but that's how it feels. Amidst constant layoffs and restructuring at the three major music companies, Sony, Universal, and Warner, since early 2024, AI becoming a more and more accepted reality in the creative process, Wall Street increasingly buying into the music market, difficulty breaking through on TikTok, slowing growth of streaming service subscriptions in top markets, and to top it off, an overall shaky economy, it's easy to feel unsettled. So let's unpack that today. Welcome back to On The Record, a music business podcast from Billboard and SickBird Productions. I'm your host, Kristen Robinson, and today we are going to tackle a big question, which is, where's the music industry going? Right now, if you ask around with folks working in the music business today, they will likely tell you that it feels like we're in the middle of a shift. Or, as I recently put it in a somewhat viral TikTok video, the vibes feel off. So I called one of music's most respected entrepreneurs and investors, Matt Pincus, and asked him to come help us understand what is going on. And in case you aren't familiar with Matt Pincus, he is perhaps best known for starting the independent publishing company Songs. It was founded in 2006 and quickly became one of the most important players in the music business, working with artists like The Weeknd, Lorde, Pharrell, Diplo, and more. Since selling Songs in 2017 to Cobalt, Matt has focused his efforts on investing in music companies that he believes in, like Splice, Soundtrack Your Brand, Dice, Love Renaissance, and many more. So with all that being said, let's please welcome to the show, Matt Pincus. All right. Well, Matt Pincus, welcome to On The Record. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and we got our red chairs today. If anyone's actually watching this, you can probably tell that we're not in our usual studio in LA. Matt is based in New York, so I'm out here in New York this week, and I've always wanted to have you on the show, so I'm really glad that we're in the same place at the same time.
Oh, amazing. Well, yeah. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
You've played a lot of different roles in the music industry throughout your time being in the business, but most recently you've really focused in on investing. Can you talk to us about how your vantage point as an investor has given you a new point of view on the music industry? What have you learned?
Well, so I'm the old guy now. I'm the investor guy now. But I was an operator first in the independent record business. I grew up through punk rock music and ran an independent record company when I was in my 20s, and then had a corporate job at EMI for a little while, and then went into publishing. Mm-hmm. And now I invest across the music business. I was always kind of like a generalist about the music business in general, in the sense that it was sort of my stamp collecting when I was a kid. Like I was interested in the whole business from a very early age.
Yeah. But like as a kid, were you reading trades and stuff like that?
You know, I played in hardcore bands in the 80s when I was like 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't a very good musician, but we were kind of a DIY scene. So you needed somebody to do like the business in the band. And so I was that guy. Yeah. And so I would help us get paid, do our record contract, figure out the merch situation, do the show settlements. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of learned a microcosm of the music business when I was really young, and decided, when my friends went on to sign to major labels and have more successful careers, and I knew I wasn't talented enough to do that, I was like, maybe I'll be like a business person, music business person. And so I didn't go to college right out of high school. I was interning at record companies, and then decided to go to college and was working as a college rep and doing all sorts of stuff throughout, on the side. Yeah. And so I was always kind of interested in the whole business, but then you have to specify. And so I was like, Songs, which was my, main business that I ran for 13 years and was what I did right before I started doing what I'm doing now. We were deep divers in one very narrow area of the business. We did co-publishing deals with songwriters and contemporary songwriters worldwide. That's all we did. Mm-hmm.
It was like Weeknd, Lorde.
Yeah, we had 125 clients. We were in business for 13 years. Mm-hmm. We started as a niche aggregator of stuff nobody else wanted. And a lot of the first deals were where I came from, like loud, sort of hardcore oriented bands. We started there, went into metal, went into AAA type of business, went into the rock business in a bigger way, then went into hip hop, and ended up in the pop music business over a 13-year period of time. But still very specific lens through which I was looking at the business. And then when you get into the investment business, you learn a couple things. First of all, you need to understand how everybody makes money in the music business, not just how you make money. Mm-hmm. And in the publishing business, it was all about what's in it for me? And my clients? How do I make this business successful for my employees and my partners and my clients. It was really about being a specialist, and particularly publishing is so convoluted that you kind of have to be like an expert in order to be able to do it.
Yeah, you have to go so deep in the weeds.
I used to say about publishing that the barrier to entry is how confusing it all is. So it keeps people out because people are like, holy shit, this is like too hard to understand. That kind of keeps people out of the business. So if you want to be good at it, you need to really get into the piping and the guts.
Yeah.
And that forces you a little bit to throw blinders up and focus on just your world.
Yeah.
And when I started being interested in helping other entrepreneurs, so my whole thing was like, I started meeting people that were similar to how I was when I was 35, let's say. I sold my business when I was 45. And I wanted to be the person I wish I had, which is, what caper are you trying to pull off? And can I help you pull off the heist?
So a strategic investor.
Yeah, like somebody who shows up with money, but also is helpful. Like that's kind of who I wanted to be. But in order to do that, I needed to understand how other people made money in the music business, like pretty much how every category, you know, what the success factors of every category were. And so you kind of have to turn into a generalist and then turn into a synthesist. So you have to then kind of say, wait a minute, how can I help this person relate to this person to create a better outcome? And so you start having a more top-down point of view. The first like 8 years or so, we were just trying to pull it off, like just be bigger than we were last year, you know, live to fight another day, like pay who we got to pay, and find more successful songs than we did last year. At the last period where we started looking at it from the top down and saying, what overall is it that we're trying to do here? And so I had to start looking at my own business from the top down. Now, as an investor, you have to look at the whole business from the top down. So that means that intellectually, you need to understand different perspectives and how different constituencies in the business think, where it might be going kind of next.
Yeah.
You know, some people like to think of themselves as like wizards who can like predict the future. I'm just trying to figure out like kind of where it's going next.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I think that the investor's perspective is really helpful right now. It feels like we're on the precipice of a lot of change in the music industry and a lot of different verticals within it. And I imagine that from your point of view, you're watching all of that because you don't want to invest your money somewhere where the music business is turning away from. One of the things that we've talked about before, you and I, in terms of the music business being on the precipice of change, is the increasing financialization of the music industry. So for those who haven't really been watching that and don't know much about it, can you explain what you feel like is happening there?
So this has been a big change, starting like maybe 10 years ago, but really 5 years ago. When I was younger, the music business had two kinds of investors, the major labels and then kind of private money, like usually wealthy people, entrepreneurs, that would put money behind private businesses. Every once in a while, you'd get like a stray pension fund that was looking for returns for their insurance company, wander into the business, usually to a great disaster. But it was pretty much a self-contained business.
Yeah. Is it because other people didn't feel like it was a good investment to invest in the music industry?
It was a lot less transparent than it is now.
Okay.
So now, you know, the funds flows are much more transparent. The money's much more collectible. So you kind of, it was a relationship business where you had to understand how to get paid. And I think financial people like kind of weren't that, you know, it was too risky, but also it was sort of a cash till for larger media companies. Like it was like the guilty pleasure of movie studios that they'd have this like little unit that churned a bunch of cash flow that they could use to kind of lubricate their businesses. But it wasn't really big enough to be like a global business.
Yeah.
And so it just didn't attract sort of financial markets. Also more recently, like with a hedge fund starting in the early 2000s, they had these things called side pockets where they would trade the public markets, but then they would have this like little pocket of private investment capital that they started putting into increasingly exotic things. And they would get very specialized in particular categories. So it started with music royalties, which, you know, were a little bit similar to like mining royalties or drug royalties, other things that spit off predictable cash flows. There would be somebody that was connected to the music business that had a friend at a hedge fund that'd be like, listen, why don't you look at music? It's fun and it like acts like the other shit you invest in. And so they started wandering into it in kind of the early 2000s was the first time I started seeing it.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, interest rates went way down. And so it became, I mean, this has been the past, like until very recently, until like the past like 2 or 3 years. I mean, marginally zero, approaching zero, then marginally zero. So that meant that it was harder to earn like yield type of investments, yield type of returns. And so they started getting more exotic about how do you earn the type of returns that you earn from your bond portfolio. They couldn't do it just by buying plain vanilla bonds. So they started doing increasingly exotic things. And lo and behold, music acts like a weird kind of bond when you look at old catalogs. So it started with that, but then it became also on the equity side, people investing increasingly in growth companies on the technology side because Spotify was such a massive success. There weren't really venture investments in the music business like of any renown. Like there was a company called Echo Nest that had a successful exit that sold to Spotify. But if you like, I've done this as like a party trick, like sit down and how many successful venture-backed businesses have been in the music business. You get to like one hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one hand is probably
very few. DistroKid, like there's very few. The way that the equity markets were so loaded with risk over the past like, sort of 10 years, people started getting increasingly interested in the music business and what could be done at different levels of it. So you ended up with this kind of financialization, first starting with the copyright business, which, historically, if you wanted to buy a catalog of music copyrights and you weren't like a music publisher, you would have to put up 50% of the money. You go to the bank and borrow the other 50% of the money. And it was pretty simple structure of your capital to buy a catalog. Now it's evolved into a world where it's like the mortgage market. Like you have your equity, which is sometimes only 10% of the overall money being used to buy something. And then you have like a mezzanine piece of debt that's paying a higher interest rate. Then you have a bank loan. And then when they get it up to a certain level, they sell the debt off to the public in a thing called an asset-backed securitization. So it's like become this whole complicated wizardry of capital structure over the past little while, which has had a lot of implications in a lot of different areas of the business. Look at the hypnosis thing. I mean, that guy, when he was going out and buying all the catalogs for twice the historical average price.
And for those who might not know Hypnosis.
Hypnosis was a publicly traded stock, like a company that was, you could buy the stock on the stock exchange.
Yeah.
And they raised money from the public to then go and buy music publishing catalogs as a public company.
And they had a lot of big ones. They ended up starting to drive up the price of catalogs.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the historical average price of a music publishing catalog, like start, 25 years ago till, 7 or 8 years ago, was 10 times the earnings of the catalog, 10 times the net revenue of the catalog. Now they're trading at up to 30 times.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's been a huge expansion in value. And you'll hear people like Robert Kinsel just did an interview with Lucas Shaw where he was talking about this, where he was saying, was the internet good or bad for music? Well, one way you could say it's good for music is that the value of music copyrights has exploded. That's partially true. I agree with him. But there's also another factor, which is the financialization of music. The way that people are structuring these deals allows them to pay more. But what it's done is you had the music business historically as kind of a self-contained world where it was the majors and a bunch of like impresario type of people investing in it. So it's relatively self-contained to now all of a sudden Blackstone and PIMCO and BlackRock and all KKR, all these big financial institutions have exposure to it. And so that starts to, when interest rates start to change, interest rate movements in the broader markets can change the way people behave around music, which is not, it correlates it more with how the broader economy behaves than it used to. And then at the same time, you have now 3 major music companies. When I started, there were 5. Now there's 3.
Yeah, so a lot of consolidation.
A lot of consolidation, but also 2 of the 3 are public companies that are pure play music companies. That didn't used to be the case.
They went public within like the last 5 years.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
So all of this is happening very quickly.
And what that means is that anything that happens in music gets tattooed on the stock price of 2 companies the next day. So people start watching the implications of things that happen on the music business. And, activist investors get interested in the stock and start buying up the Universal stock and, agitating for whatever they want to produce returns. And so you start enmeshing the music business with the broader economy in a bunch of ways that didn't used to be the case.
One of the things that I've seen multiple times is the idea that the music industry is recession resistant or recession proof. And I think one of the reasons why people have said that before is because something like Spotify gives you access to the entire world's catalog of music for just about $10. I think it's a little bit more than that now, every month. So if the economy were to take a downturn, people love music, and the odds are they're probably going to cut one of their mini streaming video on demand services before they would cut Spotify. It's something that people really love to hold on to. But what you're saying makes me feel that maybe there is a lot more risk for the music industry should an economic recession happen. Tell me your thoughts on that. Do you think the music industry is recession proof or not?
Totally agree with you that it used to be like uncorrelated to inversely correlated.
Interesting.
So it's like a, small consumer purchase. So the economy goes down. People may not go on vacation, but they'll still buy records, like they'll still buy concert tickets. Like, that's definitely true. And if you look at periods in history that, at least in my anecdotal experience of one, that I've had experiences where I worked at EMI in the early 2000s. It was like a crashing airplane with a fire on it. We went from 10,000 global employees to 5,000 global employees while I worked there. Nothing to do with me.
Wow. And that was a major music company at the time.
That was the one of the 5 major labels at the time.
And now we have 3. So if anyone's keeping up with that.
and then in the late 80s, the stock market was doing, tanked in 87, but a lot of the great music stuff happened around that time. It was a local economy where it only dealt with itself. And now all of a sudden it's connected to global markets. It's a little bit like gentrification.
Okay,
you live in your local neighborhood and you kind of know what's going on. You know everybody in your local neighborhood. And then all of a sudden somebody comes in and starts buying up all the buildings in your neighborhood. Some people get really rich from it. Some people have a hard time finding a place to live as a result. And you're like, wow, this looks great while it's happening, depending on what lens you look through. And then at one point you're like, wait a minute, I can't find a place to live. And where did all the cool people go? And it's a little bit like the music business is a little bit like that. They just never got around to us.
Interesting.
And now because of the financial markets wanting increasingly, being able to analyze things better than they used to be able to find transparency in areas that used to be opaque, and looking for returns anywhere and everywhere they can around the world, they got around to us. In some cases, that's meant really great things. I mean, I would not be doing what I'm doing 10 years ago. There's nobody would have given me $200 million and said, go invest in music companies 10 years ago. Forget it. There are ways that you can do that and earn financial returns and also improve the business. And that's why I'm doing it. So I appreciate that, the opportunity to do that. I mean, the trend that hypnosis started of raising catalog values has made a lot of musicians really rich. More musicians making more money is a great thing.
Yeah.
So, there's areas where, this has been a really good time, but it's also sometimes complicated.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying about catalogs. It's obviously made a lot of musicians rich. I think it's interesting whenever I talk to someone who's on the outside of the music business, when they hear about catalogs from their favorite artists being bought and sold, sometimes they're sad about it even. And I think that kind of might stem from Taylor Swift being their only touch point to what catalog sales are like. And that obviously wasn't ideally how she wanted it to go.
No.
So it was a negative experience for her. But I think a lot of people fail to recognize that there are some musicians who are like, oh, I can get $200 million tomorrow instead of having to wait over the course of the rest of my lifetime to get that money.
I would say that there's a difference between I'm an artist who created something and I'm going to sell it for a lot of money versus I'm an artist who created something, sold it for not that much money, and then I'm watching the person that bought it from me sell it to another person for a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a different dynamic. It's a little bit like any buy-sell situation. if you did a deal in the old times before things exploded, and then the person that, I think there's a little bit of that, but there's also, a musician who makes a decision on behalf of their own work, I think has a different sort of dynamic around it versus a musician who watches somebody make a decision on behalf of, with their copyrights. And
how do Wall Street players tend to think about music differently from someone who's like born and bred in the music industry like yourself?
Financial people are really smart. And often they are able to perceive things analytically that a lot of other people don't see. Ways to model things, similarities between how one type of investment acts relative to another. They're very good at analysis and research and parachuting into things and make sure to compare the right two things to one another. The human factor is hard to factor in. I mean, I think of the music business like when it works, you kind of understand the dynamic and you're making high conviction investments around people.
It's about the music rather than like an asset.
Well, it's not always like only about one thing.
Okay.
But it's always something about that. Yeah. The music business is not really like an industry. It's like 1,000 people that know each other. It's a very small business.
It is.
And so it's just, and I'm sure you, as a reporter, you must, come into contact with this all the time. Like, how on earth does this person know this person?
Everyone.
It's just big enough to be considered like a global business. And so that means that the human factor is relatively high, compared to the pharmaceuticals business, a gigantic business.
Totally.
And so it's never out of the room. And that's hard to price in. When I set up my operation that I'm doing now, like what I explain to the people that I raise money from is like, this is not a portfolio business where I'm managing risk from a portfolio level. This is a high conviction investment business. I think there's a lot of different types of investments to make in the music business. One of the interesting things about it is that it's a small business, but you have yield investments, venture investments, entertainment style underwriting at kind of mid-teens returns. You have a lot of different types of deals you can do in this relatively small world we lived in, but there's not enough of them to construct like a wide-ranging portfolio. And so by nature, you need to kind of understand the dynamics around what you're doing. And I think when it really sings is when you have good financial investors that are providing capital alongside people that understand the way the sort of intramural relationship-based part of the business works. That's where the real unlock happens.
Yeah.
And you've seen people throughout history have stupendous outcomes that are able to marry those two things. Like, for example, Stephen Swed, who was the owner of CSAC for a very long period of time.
It's a performing rights organization.
Yeah, performing rights organization.
Collects royalties.
And one of the best investments ever made in the music business. He wasn't really a financial person. He was an entrepreneur, but he knew a lot of financial people and could bring financial people into it that trusted him and understood him. He's like on my Hall of Heroes. Like, I never met him. He was older than me, but he's kind of on my Hall of Heroes because I feel like that's the alchemy in the music business from an investment point of view. When you understand the human part of it, the relationship part of it, the history of it, but you have access to financial capital that with an alignment that understands what you're trying to do.
Do you think there's any possibility that we're in some sort of a bubble with catalogs?
I was sort of Debbie Downer on the catalog market for a while. Like after I sold songs, we did all contemporary artists working with like people for their future output.
Yeah,
and
not buying catalogs.
I didn't buy catalogs.
Okay. Yeah.
And when I sold it, I was 45 and I had a successful publishing company. So I felt like the world kind of wanted me to raise money and buy catalogs. At that time, I could not get comfortable with it because the prices were going up and up and up, and the earnings are kind of capped. So you have to be careful to make sure that you don't try to make catalogs into something that they're not. In terms of what you're able to do with them. Like, for example, 66% of the music publishing revenue base is regulated one way or another. The publisher can't actually move that many levers to create value.
Yep.
And when you look at catalogs, like, the Bob Dylan catalog, you obviously understand why that traded at such a high price. But one of the things that people talked about at the time was Girl from the North Country, which was a Broadway play made from Dylan songs that was a big success. And so people started writing that into their valuations, like, oh, stuff like that's going to happen. And I'm like, listen, I love Metallica. Like, I grew up on those records, but there's not going to be Metallica the musical anytime soon. So you need to, like,
case by case. Like, not everyone can have a biopic. Not everyone can, like, there's a Whitney Houston slot machine in Vegas now.
Yeah.
Like, not everyone can do all of these different things to increase the value of their catalog. You have to think about.
And so I was always a little bit skeptical. As somebody who's done the job, can you really move the earnings enough? But then I watched a couple of things happen. So, the valuations went up. A bunch of us sort of assumed this has to pop and come down. Like, it has to be like a tulip market phenomenon. Like, the price is going to come down. But then I started over this summer, what if I took the other view? And I started thinking about film slate financing in the movie business.
Okay, I'm not super familiar with that.
Movies cost a lot of money. And so the studios don't have enough money to pay for all the movies they make. As the cost of movies have gone up, the studios don't have the money and can't get the money to do it. So they started letting investors pick up the risk on big Hollywood productions.
Okay.
And I'm not an expert, but, I seem to remember this started sort of in the kind of early 2000s time. There was sort of a boomlet in this of, like, hedge funds. Like, there was a guy called Ryan Kavanaugh at Relativity Media Film Company that would do these slate film financing projects. Stephen Mnuchin, the Donald Trump Secretary of the Treasury, made a bunch of money. I think the firm was called Dune Capital. And, in the early times I remember hearing about this, I didn't know much about it, but, it seemed like it was people who were sort of wandering into it in a similar way that, people wander into the music publishing catalog business. But now I think a majority, is my guess, of movies are slate financed now. It's become like a standard way that movie studios defray their risk.
Interesting.
So I'm like, what if the same thing is happening in the music business? The financial markets are going to permanently finance music publishing transactions going forward. Does that change my point of view? In a couple ways, yes. And one is that, you're going to need music people again now in this part of the world. If you've got a permanent demand for music copyright acquisitions and the capital necessary to do them, then you need the supply. What's been going on for the past couple of years has been, Bob Dylan and Queen and, Neil Young and, the sort of big, like, all-time Bruce Springsteen. And as this goes on, it's going to get increasingly more specialized. And
like,
both
buying and selling catalogs will go to more specialized artists?
Yeah, more niche.
Yeah, more niche
over
artists.
time.
Yeah, 'cause, like, the big artists, there's a finite number of
Yeah,
Bruce
exactly.
Springsteens.
And the marquee stuff, you understand why it trades for, it's kind of, and I used to say this at songs, like, the biggest deals we ever did were the easiest ones to do. When we paid a big advance to somebody, we were sure, It's the middle stuff that becomes where discernment is really important.
That's interesting.
And so I think now you've got a lot of demand on the buy side, and in order to find stuff that's big enough for these people to be interested in buying, it's again going to have to be a little bit like the mortgage business. Like, there are people who package up properties and then sell them to larger investors. I think we're going to have to see that kind of thing happen in the music business, but also on the side of, like, making the copyrights work in the market. You're going to need people who understand how to make music more valuable. And when you're dealing with, if you look at somebody at the, like, Taylor Swift level, for example, like, she's like a general interest, like, global phenomenon.
Yes.
You're going to handle that like a little bit like you handle, like, the Marvel franchise in the movie business. I mean, she's like a huge, touch, reach is huge. When you start getting into, like, the mid-tail, you have to understand the music. If you do it well, I think it could be permanent value. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I was Debbie Downer. Like, this is going to go bust. This is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And then I started saying, but wait a minute. Like, people that are smarter than me have figured out that this is something that they want to do.
Yeah.
And so what if it is permanent? Then how do you do it? There's going to be a supply issue.
I want to move on to another area of change that I have really seen, and that's, it's somewhat related, because the three major music companies, since the start of 2024, have been undergoing a lot of restructuring, which involves a lot of layoffs, and also they're kind of changing what kind of team members they're investing in. Radio and press and these kind of departments are seeing a lot of losses during this restructuring, but they're also bulking up in other areas like digital marketing or A&R. And I'm wondering, do you think, in your opinion, that this move by the major music companies to do all this restructuring starting in 2024 and continuing to now, do you think that this is just them playing catch up with the digital age, or are they seeing something in their crystal ball that most of us on the outside might not have noticed about the way the music industry is changing?
I wish we all had a crystal ball in the music business. I think part of the issue with the music business is that there is no crystal ball. What you're kind of looking for is 51% confidence. So it's not 50-50, it's 51%. I think that's what you're shooting for rather than crystal ball. But there are a lot of smart people in the major label system. And, you know, broadly speaking, I think there's kind of two paths in the music business. There's a up through the building where you get a job as a coordinator, then a director, VP, senior VP, EVP, and then you run the company up through the major label system. And then there's people who feed on what's available in the wild, all the independent people.
Yeah.
I was sort of more in that camp for most of my career. So in terms of what the sort of boardroom decisions inside the major labels are, it's not my power alley. But, you know, the major labels are tankers, big ships. The market is moving quickly. They always do catch up. Sometimes there's a lag between what's going on in the market and what the major music companies are providing to the market. The reason why my company Songs was successful is because the music publishing business at the time we started was making big records for Celine Dion. They would hire a studio for a year and put the biggest writers in the world to make a big record for a big pop star. And the world was moving in the direction of singles, not albums, 13 writers on a song, rappers guesting on a pop record where the two artists didn't even know each other. And we were young and had nothing to lose. And so we did that. We created a business for that market.
You could move fast.
And we had it to ourselves for a little while. And so we went from publishing stuff that fell off the back of a truck to having 5% of the US radio play market in, you know, a 10-year period of time. And then the majors all figured it out. And they put in charge of their companies, the A&R people, that instead
people from Songs.
Well, that was later.
Okay.
But you know, they made the A&R people the CEOs of the companies to great effect.
Okay.
And it became harder for us to compete.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason why I sold the business. It became harder for us to compete because they caught up. And so sometimes there's a lag, but they always figure it out. And I think right now you're seeing a normalization of the streaming market in a way where it was growth. Now there's still growth, plenty of growth, but it's decelerating.
Yeah.
And they're starting to look at the future now and plan, and plus two of the three of them are public. So, you know, they have shareholder pressure and they're trying to build a durable business over a long period of time. And it makes sense that they would start to move the cost structure of their business in ways to address that. But there's also been some interesting moves, you know, on the creative side of the business. I mean, I think Atlantic hiring Elliott was really interesting response to where, you know, to the market and where the market is going. The way you framed it, like, you know, the promotion people, radio people, you know, are taking hits and publicity people are taking hits, but A&R and digital marketing are attracting resources. Like, I'm like, that's interesting. I mean, interesting creative things will come from that. The one thing that I do think, from having been on the talent side of the business as a publisher, and also we had a record label called Records that was run by Barry Weiss. So I've been kind of on both sides of it. But one of the things that people always say is like, what does your label do for you? What does your publisher do for you? And the fact is, like, records need champions and artists need champions. That's what record companies do, in my opinion, is they believe in you.
Yeah. They front the cost for your creative vision, not knowing if it's going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, they take a risk. That's true, but they also believe in you, and by extension, sort of tell the world what they think is good.
Yeah, and it's just they increasingly have less levers to pull and less gatekeepers they can contact on your behalf. So
yeah, which means they just have to they have to figure out how to do it now.
So I think it's digital marketing now.
Yeah,
it's like if the gatekeeper is not a person, it might be the algorithm on TikTok.
Yeah, that's true. But I also think that there's times when the music business all works in concert and things work well. And then there's times when things become dissonant because of format shifts or consumption shifts in the market. Mm-hmm. And I think where, TikTok was a big one, big impact to the market. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit like, the TV business with reality TV. Like NBC used to make very expensive sitcoms on Thursday nights, and that was their business. And then all of a sudden, look, over here, we can make a show with no actors, no unions, no script, and do whatever we want. Just send a bunch of people to an island and sell to the same advertisers. Isn't this great? And so they just started doing that over and over and over again. And then the reality numbers, the unscripted numbers started leveling off. Mm-hmm. And they had to get back to making shows again. But it was the cable people that were focusing on doing that, not the networks. And now most of the great TV is made by different people. So things shift around a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think in the music business, it's usually the independents that figure it out first. Mm-hmm. So now we're in a moment where repertoire is super reactive and stuff is getting signed from TikTok virality very quickly.
Yeah.
And, sign it and put it out.
Yeah, like 2019 to 2023. Yeah, it was like a gold rush, really.
And it became kind of like, a data-driven business. Mm-hmm. And now I think in the past, 3 years, you're starting to see story records happen, around artists, not just track by track, but around artist stories. There's been some really good ones in the past 3, 4, 5 years. And the independents are the first people who figure out how to tell a story in a new way. And then now the majors are doing it.
So you've been through so many different changes in the music business. You've been through a lot of the phases where people thought that the sky was falling. Like we were talking about earlier with Napster around the time or just a few years before you founded Songs. And then after Napster was the big bad wolf, then, came YouTube. And then after that, people were really scared about moving over to streaming. And you've managed to survive all that and still get to have a very good view of this music business. I'm wondering, do you think that the age that we're entering into, AI would probably be the next candidate to be the big bad wolf that people are scared of? Do you think that we'll still weather that storm?
The AI thing is funny. Like I lived through crypto, every pitch is a crypto pitch. I never did anything in that part of the world.
21?
And that was a little bit like I was looking at it and going, the music business, the history of the music business is getting hundreds of thousands to millions of people to do something simultaneously for a few bucks. That's the history of the music business. Go to sell out a stadium, or a nightclub, sell 100,000 records. A bunch of people listen to a hit on the radio, get hundreds of thousands and millions of people to do something simultaneously for a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. The crypto thing was 1,200 people paying $10,000 for a song to hang up on their wall like it was fine art. That's not the music business to me. So there was never an MVP in the crypto market. As theoretically interesting as it was, there was never a minimum viable product, a killer product that got out there in the world that worked. Mm-hmm. I feel like AI is closer, but where's the product that's really going to get kids to do shit? It's coming.
Yeah. I mean, could it not be Suno or Udio?
You can kind of see the implication of it's really interesting. Like the thing I like the most about it right now, musicians like to fuck with things. Yeah. And you sampling in the 90s. they were kids with, you give them a sampler, they have their parents' record collection, and next thing you know, they're making crazy music by fucking with their parents' record collection in this crazy new machine. It's like, you can't stop that. And the most interesting thing that I'm seeing with the Gen AI business is how people in the studio are using it. Mm-hmm. So that is totally there. Mm-hmm. Like, you're in the studio, you're trying to figure out, like, I like this, like, horn line, but like, what if it was sung by elephants? And you can make that happen like in 2 seconds. That's all good news. I'm talking about the consumer application.
When we first saw Gen AI start to rise up, I heard a lot of people say that like the pitch for their company is that now everyone can make music.
But does everybody really want to make music like that bad? Like, that was my question. Like, I don't know if my mom really needs to do that. I think there's lots and lots of people who want to make music. Like, one of my main holdings is Splice. We have a very large addressable market of users that are aspirational producers or artists. I mean, there are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people globally that want to do that. So Splice is a subscription business that where you can get all of the sounds you need to make records in a digital environment. Mm-hmm. So loops, beats, samples, instrument sounds, one-shots, vocal lines. Mm-hmm. And it's increasingly become a workflow business now. So we just launched a product called Instrument, where you can record an instrument in its context, like think like, you know, a piano in a concert hall, and then play that back on any MIDI controlled device. So they give you access to the world sounds in your creation. Mm-hmm. And then now increasingly help you figure out how to make music on the platform by doing that. It's big business. It's like over 100 million in revenue, over 600,000 subscribers.
Yeah, every producer you've ever met has a subscription to Splice.
I mean, we're in you know, probably over 50% of the Hot 100, the top 100 songs use some Splice content. Mm-hmm. There have been songs like Sabrina Carpenter, Espresso, that uses a recognizable sample from our library. So this is a big business that's scaling even bigger. So I think there are lots and lots of people who are aspiring musicians and are trying to do better, trying to make a song that for themselves, trying to make one that'll impress their friends, trying to make one that'll impress people that they don't know, try to make money, try to make one that's worthy of people buying it, like all the way on up to trying to play stadiums. What I'm not so convinced of is that it can be gamified to a general consumer base that is not aspirational, but is using it to, you know, it's my, boyfriend's birthday. Yeah. So I'm going to make a special song. Like, I don't think that's the killer application of AI.
Yeah, it's like, it's fun for a minute. You get on one of these applications that can do these things and you generate a few songs for your friend's birthday, or to be like, LOL, isn't it funny that I can do this now? But those people tend to not become paying subscribers.
To me, I haven't seen the consumer application, like the consumption application. Okay. That's like the killer use of this technology yet. It's coming, you can see it, but like the fake Drake thing, like it got everybody's like, look at what the computer can do. But like, was it a good song? Like really at the end of the day, I think we're waiting for that. And the very smart technology people like the team at Splice, who have a lot of experience doing this in a bunch of different technologies, you know, like the people that Suno's bringing into their business and starting to build out, are gonna figure it out. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that we yet know what the true format shift of that is going to be. Is it going to be allowing people, fans, to have more interpolation capabilities to the stuff that they already love, for example?
So like remixing a song you already know
or
and
being
love.
more involved in it. Okay. You know, or is it going to be, you know, there's been some interesting stories recently about fully synthetic artists that have reactive songs. Like, we'll see. My gut tells me that it'll get there, but we haven't seen the real, like, that's the thing that's going to make this whole thing crack.
also one of the things that I always come back to when I think about generative AI. I do think it's going to be a disruptive force in this business. And I think it's part of all the things that we're talking about how the music industry is starting to shift. But it's really more of a revolution or a change on the music creation side rather than the music consumption side. Whereas
this is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, just to clarify my own point, that yes, Napster was very disruptive, but it was disruptive in the way that we consume music and listen to it and buy it, or not buying it. Same with Spotify. This is kind of a different thing. It's more in the lineage of sampling and that sort of thing.
And also, Napster provided something, it seems like the dark ages now, but they provided something that the record business couldn't give you. You had to buy a CD for $18 to get the song you wanted.
Oh, yeah.
And then they gave you can get whatever you want for free. And not only the for free part, but the whatever you want part, song by song. Mm. Spotify came in and gave you the world's music for one price. Mm. That stuff you really couldn't do before. I think the only place that AI so far has done that, in a productized way, is in the creation side, where it gives people making music holy shit, that works.
Mm-hmm. I'm increasingly hearing professional songwriters and producers tell me that they have been playing around.
Totally. And it's amazing to watch them do it because, again, musicians like to fuck with things. For the most part, the most interesting use cases are when it helps get out of you what's inside of you quicker, faster, and better.
Yeah.
That's, to me, the real power of it so far.
Yeah.
The consumption side of it, it's kind of has an internet slop feature to it sometimes where you're like, do people really want to hear functional music in a billion different ways? I don't know if that's really going to capture the world's attention.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to what it is that's going to do that on the consumer side of it. Mm-hmm. And it's probably gated to the licensing agreements between the major music companies and the AI platforms.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and get your pulse on AI and how it might interact with the traditional music business in the near future. So the three major music companies, Sony, Universal, and Warner, sued Suno and Udio, who are kind of two of the front runners in the AI startup or AI music startup space. They sued them for widespread copyright infringement. But more recently, Bloomberg and the Financial Times have both reported separately over the last few months that they're discussing a settlement and potentially nearing a settlement to license their works for training with Suno and Udio. I'm wondering, do you think that is a likely outcome here, or do you foresee the majors going to the bitter end with this lawsuit?
Whatever the discussions are between the majors and the AI companies is going to really result in this technology being out in the wild unrestricted, I'm very skeptical that that's the next place it's going to go. So the fact that they're cooperating and having some conversations between the two parties will lead to something, but is it going to be the unrestrained use of this technology in the wild? I would be shocked if that happens anytime soon. I think the sort of conventional wisdom point of view from the sort of been in this business for a while perspective is that it'll go down the path that's somewhat similar to what happened with YouTube. Okay. Where YouTube came rolling into the music business in the 2006 timeframe, uncapped, out in the wild,
no licenses,
being used by a million people, no licenses. Okay. And through a combination of negotiation and litigation, there ended up being this painful sausage-making process, which actually also had a very big technology component to it. So there was the licensing legal framework that was a combination of litigation and negotiation. Mm-hmm. But then there was the infrastructure of the YouTube CMS, the content management system. Mm-hmm. That was a big part of the technology, was allowing copyright holders to control their own works on the platform. That was a big technology build. So it was a combination of those three things that turned the YouTube from the death of the music business, which everybody thought it was going to be in the 2006, 2007 timeframe, to a third of the revenue base, something like that. I don't know.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's paying out a lot of money.
But it's a real revenue base. It's not everything that, maybe the music business, the copyright holders in 2007 thought it could be, but it's meaningful, and it certainly hasn't hurt the growth rate of the music business. In fact, you could argue that it's been helpful. If I'm a betting person, I suspect that the AI thing will, the argument over AI will follow a similar path. How long that takes and how expensive it is, you don't know. The record companies are more prepared for it than they were in the YouTube time. But the technology companies are also more prepared for it. So we'll see how that happens. Irregardless, YouTube was a killer application that provided real value to its users from day one. So it was out of the bag day one. I just haven't seen that yet on the AI side. Again, more on the creation side.
The music industry is still in its TikTok age, but it does feel like TikTok now for the music industry is a little bit different than it used to be. I like to think of it kind of in two time periods. The first time period would be year like 2019 to 2023, where, like I was saying before, it's like kind of a gold rush. There were all these people who were getting visibility on the platform that never had before. And record labels were, gobbling up all this talent, signing them right away to really good deals. But now we're kind of seeing the aftermath of that. All of the viral singles that happened in those early years of TikTok often didn't amount to that artist becoming a superstar.
Yeah, no artist buy-in. It's about the reactive songs, but not necessarily the story around them.
Yeah. And I mean, TikTok still is the platform that everyone goes to for digital marketing. And that's still the way that we're thinking about moving songs. I'm wondering, do you think there's any chance that we're coming to the end of the TikTok age in the music industry?
I don't think it's like the death knell for, TikTok is a huge platform that like hundreds of millions of people use, it'd be billions of people use it on a daily basis. Yeah. But I do think that people figure out better ways to tell a story. As platforms age, people figure out how to use them more effectively. There are levers on TikTok that you didn't used to be able to pull that you can pull now.
Like what?
There's a lot of really interesting, talk about AI, there's a lot of really interesting businesses that are using platform information that they're jailbreaking out of user information that they can collect to do predictive analytics in terms of how to expose records to audience.
Interesting.
So there's one, for example, called Co-Brand.
Co-Brand is great.
It's a really interesting business.
Yeah.
And they're using AI a really interesting way, in an agent sort of focused way, to figure out how to match repertoire and audience worldwide by taking information from platforms like TikTok and analyzing it in more effective ways. The thing about TikTok that is sort of distinct from other platforms, I think, is that its frequency. So radio was a slow melting ice cube before COVID. COVID pulled everybody out of their cars. The melt rate increased. So what the world loses when radio audience declines is the ability to turn a song or an artist on to millions of people with a switch. And that's a function not only of like, I'm going to display this for one listen, but they keep on playing a record till people figure out, oh my God, I love this, or I never want to hear this again. And that's like a process of a record finding its bottom. Like it gets displayed, and then some of them, when they're displayed like a certain number of times, take off like a rocket, and other ones die. That's frequency. That's what promotion does. And when radio goes away, it's harder to display a record to people all at once. The gatekeeper function is gone. The thing about TikTok is because people are making so many videos around a song simultaneously, people using the platform can hear a song like 1,000 times all of a sudden, which does effectively the same thing that radio does.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that like, how many plays does it take, like till that nth play that makes a record a hit?
There's this psychological phenomenon called the mere exposure effect, which I always cite whenever talking about music marketing, because basically what the psychological effect says is that the more times that you're exposed to anything, the more likely you are to report that you like it.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the idea.
But not all records that are played for somebody turn out to hit. But that's a very important function in the history of the music business. And I feel like labels, digital marketing people, companies like Co-Brand are figuring out how to promote using platforms more effectively. And so in the first instance, when it was like, oh my God, what's this new plaything? They were just reacting to a phenomenon that was naturally occurring in the world. And now they're starting to say, wait a minute, like, how can we figure out where an audience is for an artist or a record? And how can we more effectively map that record to that audience, which is essentially record promotion.
Yeah.
And so that's again, like a function of the music business reacting to a format shift and saying, like, we have to do the job now that we've always done, just do it in a new way. It doesn't happen overnight.
One thing that I've been watching a lot as a reporter this year is, the Trump administration. That, he came to office in January. And since then, I've had a lot of experts in the music business tell me that they find his policies to be, like, quote, predictably unpredictable. From your vantage point as an investor in the music business, have you seen any of Trump's policies over the last year impact the music business?
Well, Liberation Day was interesting.
Okay.
I had 4 transactions going the day before Liberation Day that were transformative for my companies. That I have 5 businesses that I have sizable positions in, 4 deals that were transformative for those companies. And they all went sideways on Liberation Day. And so I was like, and I'm not used to that for the reasons that we were talking about before. Like I'm used to, like, the music business is like this weird little scene of we do our own thing and the world doesn't really get around to us. And then all of a sudden I'm like, with me? Like what, because and it's part of the financialization effect that, it's because there are 2 public stocks out there that are major music companies. There's billions of dollars of debt and equity capital invested in the copyright business. And so the markets pay more attention to the music business than they did before. But obviously, like, Trump is like a volatility magnet. Like, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's been all sorts of, like, wild rumors that, like, he could suspend copyright for AI training purposes and in the name of national security. I've sort of asked around to people who I feel like know about policy and sort of, presidential authority with respect to copyrights. I don't see any mechanic by which that could happen. So I think some of the more exotic, like, freakouts people are having, I'm not so sure. I'm kind of interested. I come from the punk rock world. You used to play in hardcore bands. The golden era of punk rock music in the United States was Ronald Reagan time. And so
you're ready for a punk resurgence.
I think the Republican, like, authoritarian world is really good for angry music. And so I'm kind of like, interested. And there's some evidence of that. I mean, loud music is flying off the shelves. Tickets are selling like crazy. There's a bunch of great young bands that come from the hardcore world that all of a sudden are making things happen in the world. And so I'm like, I'm kind of, as a fan, I'm curious.
Yeah.
It's time.
Man, well, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. But before I let you go, let's end it with something a little more fun and lighthearted. I like to do this with everyone that comes on the record, and it's called Make Me a Playlist. So I'm going to give you 3 prompts for songs that I want you to add to our playlist. So the first prompt is, what is a song you can no longer gatekeep?
There's an artist called Odile.
Okay.
That has a record called Miami, and he's an LVRN artist. The record's a split record with Leon Thomas, and it's just a fucking great record. And, like, the world's kind of figuring it out in real time. Like, give it another, heartbeat, and it's gonna be everywhere.
What is a favorite throwback of yours?
A record by a band called the Cro-Mags, which is a hardcore band that influenced a lot of us in a major way from the 1980s. They have a song called We Gotta Know. And the first minute and 15 seconds of that song are just uniquely and absolutely flawless.
I must admit,
God help
I
you.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with
And
Cro-Mags.
we'll see how it lands on you. But for me,
okay.
That's a tried and true standby.
I'll send you an email and be like, with my full review of that song. And lastly, what is a guilty pleasure for you?
There's a rapper from Atlanta called Belly Gang Cushington.
Okay.
He has a record called Friend Do. It's the remix of it. I can't stop listening to it. It's not a polite record, let's say, but it's uniquely captivating in its own way. Like in a like you want to hear it again kind of way.
That's a good pick. Matt, thank you so much for coming to On The Record. It means a lot that you came. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Another special thank you again to Matt Pincus for coming on the show this week. Now let's throw it to our chart roundup for this week. After many weeks with K-pop Demon Hunters tracks dominating the top 10, it's now Taylor Swift's turn. Following the release of her new album, The Life of a Showgirl, she holds all 10 spots on the chart this week. So let's count it down. At number 10 is Cancelled. This week's number 9 spot is Eldest Daughter. At number 8 is Life of a Showgirl. Number 7 is Actually Romantic. Coming in at number 6 is Wishlist. This week's number 5 is Wood. Number 4 is Father Figure. Coming in at number 3 is Elizabeth Taylor. Number 2 is Opalite. And finally, in its first week at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, it is The Fate of Ophelia by Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift has taken over the Hot 100 top 10 this week, but Life of a Showgirl has done even more than that. This album has now sold 3.4 million physical and digital copies, according to Luminate, which means she now has the largest sales week for any album in its first week since Luminate first began tracking music data in 1991. The single-week album sales record was previously held by the debut week of Adele's 25. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of On The Record, and another special thank you to this week's guest, Matt Pincus. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a rating, a follow, a thumbs up. All of those things really help us to grow and reach new audiences. Again, I'm your host, Kristen Robinson, and tune in next week for even more industry insider knowledge. See you then.